Hello, John here. In the current economic climate, the USA has seen massive amounts of economic instability, as inflation and overheating markets are making the economy more vulnerable. These conditions are prompting people to ask the question: are we about to enter a recession? Now, this video will mostly be a general overview of the US economy. It will include potential solutions to fixing our economic situation, how I think those events will play out, as well as how you could potentially secure your financial well being in this period. So, to start, I'll give a general overview of how the US economy is going right now. And well, it's not looking great. First off, we have massive inflation. Now, I have covered inflation's causes in a prior video, but I did not go in depth to how that is actually impacting the US economy. So I'll do that now. High inflation in the USA wreaks havoc on the economic output of the nation, as in the first quarter of 2022, the GDP was down 1.5%. That seems to be due in large part to a decrease in the overall exports and as well as Omicron concerns. Now, the main problem that I see right now with the economy that's actually in our control is the consumer demand. We have way too much consumer demand. I mean, it must be said that consumer demand is necessary to run an economy, and normally high consumer demand is seen as a positive indicator for the economy. But in its current state, where we have very low supply, low and production is being stymied, I guess, you lead to inflation because you have more people with more money chasing less goods, which causes inflation. And this is a self perpetuating cycle. The more inflation you have in your country, the more people are incentivized to spend right now, leading to further inflation, so on and so forth, until people can't pay for it anymore, and the whole system comes crashing down. Now, obviously, this is pretty alarming for the average person because if you look at the indicators, high energy prices, high inflation, overheating market, among a few other indicators, the economic climate is very treacherous. So, next, I'll discuss some potential steps that the Fed will probably need to take, and to what degree they need to be taken in order to fix our economy, and what those steps will mean for normal people like you and me. So, first off, stopping the money printer. This obviously prevents further dilution of the currency. It's the first step, and they started this around January 1st. Now they say they want to stop it by March, which is already passed. Now I don't think that's the case, and I'll get into that late, why. But in theory, this prevents further dilution of the currency. Next, quantitative tightening. I'm sure most people who bother to actually watch these videos have heard of the term quantitative easing. Just think of this as the opposite of quantitative easing. Instead of purchasing government bonds, and I'm pretty sure during the COVID-19 pandemic, they actually also bought corporate bonds and mortgage-backed securities. Instead of buying more of those, they basically just let that debt mature, which should, in theory, make liquidity more difficult to come by, which desensitizes de-incentivizes loaning, and it also takes money out of circulation, shrinks the Fed's balance sheet. Um, so this should increase the cost of capital, yada yada yada. Okay, next we have interest rate rises. Now I'm pretty sure this is the big one. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about this. Basically, Fed just raises interest rates on all debt, pretty much. Um, and this makes buying things on borrowed capital more difficult because it makes people have to pay more. Like this things makes things like taking out, like, I don't know, like a mortgage more difficult. Okay, so now it's economic outlook. Decision's probably gonna run contrary to what the media is talking about, mainly because the media has an incentive to lie to make the inflation seem not as bad as it really is. So just trigger warning here. Okay, inflation right now is almost definitely double digits because CPI inflation, which is the metric they actually use to measure inflation, isn't measuring the price of goods like energy and food, which I don't know. You kind of need those to to live. I mean, I went to Costco like a couple weeks ago. Food prices were up at least 30% on all fronts. Like it's not like specific to certain goods. And I think I already talked about gas prices. Like I think it was 7.99 in like LA the other day. It was crazy. But even if you take the government's word and say we have an 8.6% inflation, and we apply basic formulas meant to measure inflation, like Taylor's rule, I mean, This is like I mean this applies like you remember like 1980s. I don't know if you do, but back then we had an inflation of 12%, and they had to jack interest rates up to 18% to fight that. Now look, around June 14th, the Fed hiked rates by 0.5%, 0.75%, and many news outlets were calling this a bold move. Now look, I don't mean like a bold move. I don't mean to be a fearmonger when I say this. But if they're calling 75 basis point increase a bold move, we're probably already doomed. And look, on the larger scale, when they set a 3% interest rate goal by the end of 2022, let me ask you, will that be anywhere near enough to combat 8.6% inflation? Let alone, inflation will probably be higher by the end of the year. But I digress. Now, inflation is going to remain high until we get our energy crisis under control. So unless energy prices come down, we are going to have an economic catastrophe, the likes of which will probably be similar to like the early 1974ish period. Because during that time, oil embargoes caused the oil price to triple, and it hasn't quite tripled, but it's increased so much that I think it'd be similar to that. It could also be considered close to like 1980s in terms of how bad it is. Oh, but don't worry, it gets worse. Because you may be thinking, well, we could just increase interest rates to stop inflation, right? I mean, like if they're not increasing rates enough, there has to be a good reason for it. And well, yeah. You see, back in 1980, we didn't have a crushing debt load. In 2022, our debt, like I don't know, like 29, 30 trillion dollars. It's not. If we were to raise interest rates, realistic economists say like, okay, 5 to 6%. 5 to 6% is the absolute maximum we can raise interest rates to without killing the economy. So this leaves the Fed with only one reasonable option. I mean, yeah, and it's not pretty. They have to kill demand, which means killing the market. Now, it probably won't happen immediately. I mean, it could. But in my opinion, probably sometime in 2022, 2023, we'll enter a full blown recession. And it's going to be really ugly with high inflation and economic decline for some time. I mean, okay, when I say there's only one option, there is another. You can do hyperinflation, but I don't think we want to end up like, I don't know, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, post Soviet Union, Russia. I think we know what happens there. So now that we've established the basis from which I am going off, I'm going to begin to establish what you can do to stabilize your portfolio and secure yourself for the rough times ahead. Now, just because a recession is imminent, that does not necessarily mean that you have to sell all of your assets. That is not the right choice. But instead, it's probably a good idea to reallocate funds away from, let's say, I don't know, like certain healthcare stocks, tech stocks, stocks that aren't profitable, that are likely to not survive the upcoming time of stagflation. Like many startups that you're investing into, you should probably get out of those while you still can. The most important thing to remember when evaluating how a company will perform during recession is that they need strong cash flows, low debt, good profitability, the works. Now, many of these types of companies will go down in the market regardless of whether the price action is warranted or not. Because let's be honest, trying to time the market right now is like playing slots in a casino. There's no rhyme or reason, just volatility. And people are trying to keep the gravy train going. But when these companies' share prices collapse, assuming you have done your due diligence and recognize a high probability of price fluctuations, then you can enter a long position into these companies to get them at an undervalued price. I'll refrain from listing any stocks that I own for this because I'm obviously biased. I mean, like when it comes to people's money, like as much as I want to like deny that I'm objective, like I'm biased. Like everyone is. That's just how it is. But I don't know if people like ask for it. I guess I'd be happy to give a fundamental breakdown of some companies that I think might perform well in the upcoming period. All right, it's like 12 in the morning and I'm getting really tired, so I'm probably just want to get this video out as soon as possible. So I'm probably gonna end. I don't know, like maybe get some rest. I'll post a follow-up video on which sectors I think will perform well going forward. Hopefully, like later today, but I'll see. So this is John Feng signing off.